Good morning, everyone. This government is the last government other than the Ford government that I would trust with reforming our justice system. And yet here we are with them reforming our justice system, right? The Trudeau government will create a justice system that is fair by determining criminal sentences based on skin color. David Lametti's tweeting, treating all crimes the same way regardless of the circumstances does not protect anyone, but it ends up hurting too many people. We are taking action to create a justice system that is fair, effective, and keeps all Canadians safe. This is important because the rule of law is that the rule of law applies to everyone equally. We're all the same, right? Doesn't matter the color of your skin, except they're saying, hold on a second, it does matter the color of your skin, and we should have different laws. We should have different laws taking that into consideration. What circumstances specifically, right? Here's Prime Minister and President Joe Biden to hold a bilateral meeting on Tuesday, and Mary, quite contrary, says Dumb and Dumber 2. Come on, man. I don't remember Joe Biden's eye being so squinty when he was younger. And yeah, I don't remember that. When did that start? Was it just during the presidential run? Here's, I like memes. Here's one. Square wheels and a snail as your steed, right? Trudeau, a bearded Trudeau says, roll out. There's more gray in that beard though, artist. Come on, more gray, much more gray. And the vaccine is in a square wheeled wagon. Yeah, that about covers it. That about covers it, right? Trudeau at the helm. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? All right, these doctors are heroes. Dr. Gill, I always call her Dr. Kaur, but she's been called Dr. Gill the whole time. So Dr. Gill, Dr. Phillips, and another Dr. Kaur, I think, and got together to put together a discussion about what's going on in the medical industry. And there's some really big boom moments in this hour-long interview. It is well worth your time. The interview starts out with a recapping of what rights you have, a recapping of what the charter rights are, and security of the person, and that's one of them. But it's a good intro to the discussion that they have. They talk about nurses being afraid of their college. So when you become a nurse, you have to join the College of Nurses. I think it's called something like that anyway. It's a professional body that you have to pay money to, and you can't get hired unless you're part of that body. So if they say, we will repeal your membership in this body, they are threatening your job, okay? So that group is saying, if you speak out about this in the media, on Facebook, whatever, you will lose your job. Okay, so the stakes are high. This is adding color to a situation where people would say, "Why aren't they speaking out?" They're not speaking out. One, because it's completely it is not looked upon as a good thing to question the narrative, right? I've said before, we're the new 9/11 conspiracy theorists, right? Like what has happened is as big as 9/11. It's ongoing. It's still happening. The financial impact is still increasing. People are still locked down. Businesses are still locked down. We're one of the central locations of the explosion, right? We're in the West. This is happening all across the West. I was looking around and I thought, what does it take to get everybody to put masks on? Like, what kind of level of bombardment does it take to get everybody in a small city like Guelph? And I've talked about our numbers before. I've talked about how few people are in the hospital. I've been taking pictures every day. We still have, I think we had 7 in the hospital the other day. I think we're down to 5 now. But it hasn't been over 10. It hasn't been like 30 have been in the hospital and blah, blah, blah for consistently the whole time. Never. It's never happened. So it's interesting to see people comply with the health orders, etc., despite the evidence that's right in front of them. Don't believe your lying eyes, citizen, right? It's really interesting. So this interview is really good. I'm going to show you this part. She's talking about vitamin D and the data being overwhelming that it helps specifically people of color, she says, but it helps people fight off this COVID-19, and we're not using it. And we're not using a bunch of stuff. And there's a lot of frustration in this, but I'm just going to play like 10, 15 seconds till it stops making sense. And yeah, I think it's important to hear. Here we go.
Substantial. which is similar to the data that we also knew from previous viruses, such as influenza, for example, which has a large body of data. And we know that vitamin D is actually essential for our overall immune responses. So in many countries, even the UK, for example, they're supplying free of charge vitamin D for the high-risk populations that are at risk of having a vitamin D deficiency.
So why isn't Canada doing that?
Exactly. And this is something that we have brought up to the public health officials.
And what's the response you get?
There's never a response.
Is there an...
That's the most maddening thing. That's the most maddening thing about all this. There's never a response, and there isn't. The checkmate to any well-asked question is to just ignore the question completely. We don't answer questions we don't like, and we're not going to answer that question. Doesn't matter if 3 doctors are sitting there saying, yeah, it looks like the UK does this. It looks like a good intervention that'll save lives and is cheap. Vitamin D is relatively cheap considering the amount of money we're spending in our government for these experimental vaccines. So with all of that said, why wouldn't they do it? All 3 doctors. Great question. We'd love to know the answer, right? And it's very, very interesting. So worth the time to check out. One of the other things they highlight during the interview is that over the past 12 months, she highlights, specifically Dr. Gill highlights that we've lost track of the principles of public health. And the first principle is do no harm. And the interview starts with that. And they also say, number 1 in this tweet says, public health is all about health outcomes, not just a single death like COVID-19. It's important to also consider harms from public health measures, #total harms. So yeah, I'm looking at one disease to the exclusion of everything else, including excluding cancer, including excluding early surveillance of other things as well. People are coming in. Well, there's a story that Dr. Phillips relates saying that people are coming in with things that happened pre-antibiotics because people are afraid to come into the hospital. And it's like, come into the hospital. We've done such a number on people's heads. People are putting covers on their single oxygen intake valve and not thinking about this until people are getting sick. Right? And hurting themselves, bacterial pneumonia, or getting impetigo on their face, or just passing out because of lack of oxygen, because they're exerting themselves. I've seen masks on kids on sledding hills, right? And I mean, that's damaging, right? That's not great. Moving on, we're seeing anti-lockdown protests every day. Not every day. Usually over the weekend, as in Toronto, there was an anti-lockdown protest. Rachel Notley is trying to make political hay out of this protest. And so the direction she goes with the political haymaking is interesting. Here we go. Rachel Notley says, today, outside of the federal building, we saw people gathering under the guise of protesting COVID-19 measures. Many in attendance then lit torches and proceeded to march around downtown Edmonton. These marches are intended to intimidate. They intend to spread hate. This wasn't about COVID-19. Rachel Notley can read protesters' minds. Did you know that? It's incredible, an incredible skill for a politician. She could just stand in front of a crowd, read their mind, and tell them exactly what they want to hear. Demonstrations of white nationalism are a real threat, and we must confront that threat, she says. Recently, we have seen multiple attacks on Black Muslim women in Edmonton. We must continue to speak out. No racialized person should feel unsafe in our community. We must strengthen our resolve and do more to fight back against racism. I'm sorry, I was expecting anti-Black racism or something to that effect. Anyway, back against racism. We simply cannot allow what happened today to stand. Okay. So apparently lighting torches and marching around Edmonton to say we're free and going on a freedom walk, not okay. Not cool with Rachel Notley because she knows what you're thinking. It's very interesting. It's very interesting when politicians know the intentions of people's actions. It's really interesting. I find that to be one of the most interesting parts of the post-2015 world, the post-truth world. It's that the news knows the intention of every bad actor, but the government definitely wants you safe. It's all about your safety, comrade. The government is beyond the pale, but your actions, we know what you mean. We know your intentions. Unbelievable. Here is Dr. Tam. She says COVID-19 activity is declining, but variants at critical juncture, says Tam. We've just increased the CT scan cycle, the CT cycle. The cycle count. And I mean, if you increase the cycle count, which we had 30 and now we're at 35, as far as I can understand it, then we're at a point where they've literally just turned up the knob, and we're going to, of course, see the variants of concern, VOC, variants of concern, increase because they changed it from 30 cycle count on the 15th to 35 on the 16th or 17th, but there is no archive for that date. So they did it probably on the 16th, and it was updated on the 17th. Here's Eric Topol. He's a doctor. He says the good news is that the South African is back. Excuse me. The good news is that South Africa is back to pre-B1351 baseline in COVID cases. There's no proof this variant is more infectious. Its immune evasion is enough to explain how it took off, and the descent occurred without vaccines. So we're back to normal in South Africa, but all of these variants of concern are being hyped as if they're the next big thing. Oh yeah, see, I responded here. Are being hyped as if they're the next big thing. And I mean, how could they be? How could they be? And how is this any different than a regular seasonal virus? Is this any different than a regular seasonal virus? Like a flu? And I was saying, like, somebody said, yeah, I think I explained this yesterday. Somebody said, do you believe in COVID? I was like, I believe in COVID as much as I believe in the H1N1 flu. I believe in a virus that has a distinction that humans gave it, is making people die in about the same numbers that people die every year. That's what I believe. Okay, and here's another reason I believe that. Here's another arrow in that quiver. Clinical lab scientist in virology and immunology scans 1,500 California COVID-19 positive lab samples with an electron microscope, and guess what he finds? Zero COVID virus. Everything came back as influenza AB, the greatest hoax ever. Here we go.
D in virology and immunology. I'm a clinical lab scientist and have tested 1,500 supposed positive COVID-19 samples collected here in Southern California. When my lab team and I did the testing through Koch's postulates and observation under a scanning electron microscope, we found no COVID in any of the 1,500 samples. What we found was that all of the 1,500 samples were mostly influenza A and some were influenza B, but not a single case of COVID, and we did not use the BS-PCR test. It's polymerase chain reaction test. Celia Farber does wonderful journalism on the topic. I did videos on this channel for that. We then sent the remainder of the samples to Stanford, Cornell, and a few of the University of California labs, and they found the same results as we did. No COVID. They found influenza A and B. All of us then spoke to the CDC and asked for viable samples of COVID, which CDC said they could not provide as they did not have any samples. We have now come to the firm conclusion through all our research and lab work that the COVID-19 was imaginary and fictitious. The flu was called COVID, and most of the 225,000 dead were dead through comorbidities such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, emphysema, etc. Then they got the flu, which further weakened their immune systems, and they died. I have yet to find a single viable sample of COVID-19 to work with. We at the 7 universities that did the lab tests on these 1,500 samples are now suing the CDC for COVID-19 fraud.
I mean, there's so many areas that I could have stopped that and said, see, proves my point. But it just kept getting better. Okay, did you hear what he said? He tested 15,000 samples. He tested 1,500 samples. Which one was it? 1,500 samples. Not one came back with COVID. They all came back influenza A, B. Then he contacted the CDC. Well, first he contacted other universities to verify his actual data. Not models, not speculation, data. Contacted 7 other universities that verified his data. And then they contacted the CDC and said, you know, we can't find any COVID in these samples. Can you please send us a viable sample so we can match it against the positive samples and blah, 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 blah. I don't know the specifics. I'm just giving you some color, right? But then the CDC said, no, we don't have that. They couldn't provide the sample. They couldn't provide the sample of COVID, the isolated sample of COVID. So he's saying that it was the flu all along. And I think that if they sold this as a bad flu last March, it wouldn't have got past closing on St. Patrick's Day. If they said the flu is so bad this year, we have to shut down our society. we are closing all bars because of the flu, do you think that the bars would have closed? I don't think they would have. I don't think that is even in the realm of possibility. The bars would have said, yeah, okay, sure. Your public health order, it's not closing my bar. But they said it was COVID and it was new, and they scared people into complying for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And a year later, here we are. It's the flu all along, says this guy. Who would maybe know, right? Interesting stuff happening. Okay, let's go into some lockdowns. I think this is going to be a long show. I don't know, maybe not. And sorry, I got all distracted earlier. There was people asking me questions, and I've got other things to do, as I said, and sometimes things interject and intercede with what I'm doing here. So apologies. I hope it wasn't too distracting for you. Okay, onward. Switzerland had a referendum about lockdowns, voted never to have one again. Guess what? Everyone is out and about as normal with normal average death rate. I wonder why the mainstream media have kept this quiet. Yay, Switzerland, good for them. Do you think that I don't know at this point in time, if we had a referendum, that it would be a fair referendum, because we don't have all of the information. We have one side of the information that is a very fear-driven side, a very fear-driven slant on the flu, on a respiratory virus, a seasonal respiratory virus where people who are infirm and elderly, aged, and have comorbidities die. And I'm sorry, that sucks. Every death is a tragedy, right? Death is awful. I don't like death. I don't wish death on anyone. But I definitely would prefer that we not shut down our society and inflict economic misery unnecessarily on everyone because some people die. It doesn't make any sense to do that. It's insane to do that. We're going to go through a little international travel here, and then we're going to come back through Pearson Airport. And Chris Sky comically goes through the checks and balances and gets through without having to quarantine or take a test. So I'll be interested to see if police show up. I have a feeling that he's going to be charged with something or other. They'll try and find something. And I'm not saying that what he did was wrong. What he did was legally to the letter, legal correct. But I think that they're going to try and punish him because they don't want people following his lead. Right? So that's what I think. But first, here we go to New York. New York. If you're fully vaccinated, NBC News New York says, against the coronavirus, now what? Don't expect to shed your mask and get back to normal activities right away. There's going to be disappointment, if not shock. That's going to be a disappointment, if not a shock, to many people. Yes, in New York, if you're vaccinated, nothing really changes, which is what I've been saying for days now. Every single day I've been saying, what changes if you get the vaccine? The vaccine doesn't stop transmission. It doesn't stop you getting it. It just limits your symptoms, kind of, but you have to get tested for this thing anyway. Oh no, do you have COVID-19? Look up so we can test all the way back at your brainstem, but it's so contagious you can't spit on this thing and I'll know in 10 seconds. Nope. Sorry, not believable, not believable. Merseyside police, let's go to England. Merseyside, I've been to the Merseyside, ferry across the Mersey, right? I've been on the ferry across the Mersey, and this is where my family lives, actually. This is crazy. This is the graphic novel about the post-apocalyptic world that you don't want to live in. This is V for Vendetta. This is all of those things, but it's real, and that's unfortunate, right? So being offensive is an offense, say the Merseyside police. Which offense is that? Don't we have the Magna Carta? Isn't freedom of speech something like, or is freedom of speech purely an American thing? I thought that individuality of the person, agency of the person was kind of hashed out in England first and then leaked out, and then some people kind of papered over that, and then the Americans did the American Revolution and Magna Carta, and I could be wrong on all of this. I thought, and I did some research into the Canadian Charter of Rights, and it said that it goes back to the Magna Carta. It's supposed to carry forth the spirit of the rights that have been won through history of people and their agency and all of that. But I think that they're trying to get it so that, like, if you don't comply, they can take your job and deperson you, right? Like, and you can starve on the street for all they care because you're a non-person, right? Being offensive is an offense. Yikes. Like that's not the world you want to live in. You shouldn't go around offending people just to offend people, but you should be able to say, I think that maybe a year in, and if I hired you to deal with this crisis, if I hired you last year to do a bathroom, let's say, and you came to me a year later with $1 billion bill and a destroyed bathroom, I'd fire you. And I'd find somebody who can do the damn job, right? And so it goes that if you hire a group of people and call them public health officials, and they lock down your business, destroy your economy, destroy your culture, seed division, maybe a year in, after no progress has been made at all, and you can look at Florida and a whole bunch of other places and see that they're open and see that they don't have mass deaths and mass casualties, etc., maybe you should fire those people. Maybe you should get rid of those people. Maybe you should say, you've done a bad job. What you've done has not made us safer or healthier or more prosperous. You are not managing this crisis well. None of you. That's maybe what you should do. Maybe we should hire Dr. Phillips and Dr. Gill and Dr. Kaur. I'd rally behind that. Yes, please. Okay, Tom Newton, this is in the UK. So, and again, I look at these places because Times Radio, London, right? London Times, I believe. I look at these things because I think that they're instructive of what's coming here. And I've not been far off, right? Like we were looking at Australia and seeing what people were doing there. It hasn't been too far off from our lockdowns, right? Like we've just undergone 45 days of lockdowns. Ski hills have been closed. Do you think they could do this for a flu? I don't think they could. Okay, UK. There are two dramatic differences with this lockdown from unlock from last summer's, I understand. One is the pace. There will be long gaps between the four steps of release. Step 1 in March, all schools back on the 8th of March, 2 households able to meet in a garden on the 29th. But the latest thinking tonight is we won't see step 2 until May, non-essential retail open. Outdoor hospitality. Step 3, pubs and restaurants, indoors, etc. like to be pushed back into June. The second big difference is this time education and social contact are being prioritized over the economy. For the former to open up safely, the latter will have to wait some time. Expect howls of anger from some backbench Tories in the UK and sector groups, but ministers insist that's what the public wants, and opinion polls do seem to back that up. I also hear we get a huge dump of scientific data tomorrow, not least the new work on vaccine efficacy, which explains exactly why this must be. So the October release email that said we are going to be slowly opened and more locked down than last year, not wrong. Not wrong. We're just waiting for that economic collapse and the introduction of UBI. That's supposed to be Q1, end of April. Do you think they can make it? I don't know. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm very wrong. Okay. Andrew Lico says the notion we should reopen more slowly, not more rapidly than last summer, when since then we have had an additional 15% to 20% of the population get the coronavirus and 30% of the adult population vaccinated is just wrong. It's not just wrong. It's bizarre to the point of incomprehensibility. So he's saying that 50%, right? 30% plus roughly 15 to 20% have some sort of immunity. Plus, there's a group of people that live in long-term care, et cetera, that are not out. This is insane. This is insane, the pace that they're suggesting. Today, it is legal to dine indoors and go to the mall on the north side of Steeles Avenue, York, but it will be illegal to dine indoors and shop in the mall on the south side of Steeles Avenue, Toronto, because science. Yes. So back to Toronto. Oh, we should have gone through. You know what? Maybe I moved the Chris Sky thing to its own. Yeah, I did. I moved it to its own thing. So we'll get there in just a minute. I'm just underlying the hypocrisy of these lockdowns, right? There's no reason for this. Pastor James, there is a pastor who is in jail because he refuses to turn his congregation away. And Randy Hillier discusses him. They discuss the jailing of Pastor James Coates in Alberta and why this matters to every Canadian. It does matter to every Canadian. You should be aware of what's going on. Randy Hillier says Pastor James is unquestionably a political prisoner in Canada. COVID is a political problem, not a health problem. Those who oppose the government's method face detention and punishment. Yeah, there's lots of that going around, right? Kingston, they're in green. Kingston region has only seen 1 death connected to the virus over the course of the pandemic. It has no deaths in long-term care facilities and was the only one of 3 health regions in Ontario allowed to transition to the green zone on February 10th. That's interesting, right? And they want to say, how did Kingston do it? How many PCR tests did they do? I know a way to get to 0 positive tests. Stop testing. Nice and easy. Very simple. Okay, Pearson Airport. Coming into Canada, Pearson Airport showing you how to defeat the mandatory COVID test and any potential hotel quarantine. Skip the 2 to 3 hour lineup with VIP treatment from the police. Definitely the best video you've seen. COVID, you're welcome. Chris Sky. So, and the video is on Instagram. I don't have Instagram on here, but it worked on my phone, so I was able to watch it this morning. And it's Chris Sky coming out of baggage. He walks into the area where there's a lineup, and he says, I have a medical condition, so I'm not wearing a mask, and that's why I'm not wearing a mask. And 2, I'm not taking your test because of my charter rights, my basic charter rights. We'll see you later. And he walks out. And they tell him to stop yelling because he was yelling to the people in line saying, if you're a Canadian citizen, you don't have to put up with this. You can just say no and walk out. So worth the watch. He's a very loud personality, but I mean, he's doing good work as far as I can see. Here's another thing. Here's another reason to maybe access this. Anxious travelers coming into Canada say they are waiting more than 6 hours trying to book a COVID-19 quarantine hotel through a government phone number, with many unable to get through it all. 6 hours on the phone. Please, I just want to stay in the hotel. I don't actually want to stay in the hotel. I have a house. I'd rather go there. Trudeau hotel quarantine policy has nothing to do with public health or public safety and everything to do with public relations. This exchange proves that. Yeah, here's Michelle Rempel. And here she is talking to the Liberal ministers, asking for data. I think this whole 1 minute and 30 seconds is worthwhile. Here we go.
Question: can anybody at PHAC table data that shows that quarantining at a hotel is better from a public health perspective than quarantining at somebody's house?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. What we can bring forward is certainly happy to take that question back to the department and look for.
Can you table that with committee through you, Chair?
Just for clarity, Mr. Chair, and just to bring forward the rationale in support of this.
Could you table with committee the data on adherence to quarantine for the last year? Does that data exist?
Mr. Chair, we'd be happy to take that question back to the department and bring forward information with respect to adherence to quarantine measures that's available. Thank you.
Was that data used in informing the decision to make people quarantine at a quarantine hotel, which I note in the main estimates is going to cost $250 million? So what data was used to inform that decision? $250 million. What data was used? Anyone? I mean, it's just $250 million. I mean, what's that between friends, right? Anyone?
They don't have the data. They don't want to give the data. They're not interested in having a rational scientific discussion about what's going on. They just want to spend money, $250 million, right? There's no data backing up this movement to force Canadians to spend money and time in a hotel. There's no data that says it's better to quarantine in a hotel than it is to quarantine at home. There's no data that says COVID-19. Well, let's not get into that. Let's get into further lockdowns. In Barrie, they have the numbers for green. Even with COVID-19, even with this terrible, contagious virus floating around, going to get you around every corner, but not after 8 o'clock. And, you know, all sorts of caveats. Smartest virus in the world, right? Even with low numbers, North Bay is being made to stay locked down because their city council refuses to go against the health orders of the public health official. And even though there are a whole bunch of false positives. So in this one, it was planned before the announcement Friday extending the stay-at-home orders in the North Bay Perry Sound District Health Unit area to March 9th. There were 18 new infections announced in North Bay Friday, bringing the total active case counts to 28, with 13 positive results related to an outbreak in the Castle home for the aged. One of those positive results was confirmed to be a variant of concern. None of these results being reported are residents of the long-term care facility. We are pro-choice in our group. I mean, we're not anti-maskers or anti-vaccine. We're pro-choice and we're pro-informed consent, St. Jean said when interviewed about the demonstration last Sunday. He suggested people research the issues about the tests for COVID-19, how vaccines are made, and look into the reactions from them, as well as the health risks of wearing masks. So that's interesting. I'm glad they reported on that. That's good on them. But here's North Bay Nugget, not nugget.ca. They say 7 Castle home caregivers retest negative for COVID-19. So they justified keeping people locked down for false positives. A media release from the residents said 7 of the caregivers have retested negative, and administration is working to arrange retesting for the other 3. The residents the caregivers care for were immediately moved into isolation and tested following the positive test results. All have been confirmed negative for COVID-19, Castle Home said in an update to a media release issued Friday. Castle Home said in the release that as soon as it's able to open its doors to essential caregivers, testing will resume. So isn't that interesting? I think that's wild, right? In my school district, in my school area, they're opening windows in classrooms. I think this is probably widespread, but I didn't think to even question it too much. I thought, it seems kind of insane to do that in the middle of winter. And my kids, both of them, usually run warm. And so they're warm, and they're wearing t-shirts and shorts in the house in the wintertime. And we don't keep the house particularly warm, but they're just crazy. And so both of them said, "Oh yeah, we have to bring a sweater to school, Mom and Dad, because it's cold in the classroom." And I was like, "Why is it cold in the classroom?" Well, they're opening windows. Why? For ventilation, better ventilation. If the HVAC is working, that means the temperature is balanced. You can't just open windows in the middle of wintertime. That's going to create problems. Not to mention be expensive and stupid. Anyway, BC officials order windows screwed shut after teachers open them to improve ventilation. They go through they're arguing that the school board hasn't done enough, but a working HVAC system keeps the temperature at the right temperature for the building. It doesn't have like wind blowing in your face all the time. It's not. Oh my goodness. Anyway, after teachers began opening windows wide to increase airflow in the affected classrooms, despite the cold temperatures outside, the school district responded by sending contractors to fix the issue. The district says those contractors found safety issues with the windows and partially sealed them. I think it's funny because for a lot of reasons, because the contractors probably, well, it says here, according to the Ministry of Health guidelines, BC schools are required to ensure heating and ventilation HVAC units are in good condition. The ministry wants schools' air systems upgraded with MER 13 filters, which can filter out bacteria and viruses. None of that says opening windows is a good idea. None of that says opening windows to create ventilation is a good idea in the middle of winter. When it's minus 20 outside, don't open the windows. Anyway, the district, back to this. The district said the use of windows to circulate fresh air was found to be a potential safety hazard during opening and closing functions on some of the windows. So in January, contractors repaired the issue and sealed the windows for safety. It's for your safety, comrade. This mask commercial, the World Economic Forum put this mask commercial out, and they're pushing this mask that has an app, and it will remind you if you forget to put it on. I didn't forget mask. Unbelievable. Money. This is interesting. Indigenous Service Minister Mark Miller says he was alarmed by revelations of a December investigation into construction practices in on-reserve water projects. Now, this article, I'll show you this here. This is a quote from the article. Indigenous Services Canada does not have a list of companies that received contracts for water projects in First Nation communities, nor does it keep track of issues with these firms. So we're spending like a lot of money on this, and we don't have any idea how much money we're spending or what the work looks like, how much it costs, etc. And I'll show you the quote here. Here it is. Despite guidelines. Oops, that's not their quote. Hold on. That is the quote. Hold on. Despite guidelines that suggest a preference for jobs be given to companies with a satisfactory performance record, ISC does not have a list of companies that received contracts for water projects in First Nation communities, nor does it keep track of the issues with these firms. So there could be massive problems, and nobody's keeping track of that, right? Very interesting. That's not what I need. This is a very in-depth report, but I think it's interesting that they're talking about $90 million for a company in air, but it doesn't really give a good breakdown. It just says we really don't know, in my opinion. So not that it's flimsy, it's making a lot out of a little. I think that we should probably be keeping track of the spending that we're doing in First Nations, especially if we're trying to fix this water problem, and especially if from 2015 to 2021 we haven't been able to solve that problem yet, right? Like Justin Trudeau said, oh, we can solve that problem. Has Phoenix Pay been solved yet? Phoenix Pay is not solved. So who needs water and who needs to get paid, right? In the private sector, if you couldn't pay your employees correctly, you probably wouldn't last very long. But in the public sector, no problem. No problem, guys. Irving Shipyard Builder is making a fortune as per usual with the Liberals in charge. Cost of federal science ship jumps from $108 million in 2008 to nearly $1 billion in 2021. Isn't that crazy? Okay, the cost of building, I'm just going to go through it with you. The price tag for the project that had been steadily climbing from $108 million in 2008 to $144 million in 2011, and then $331 million, according to federal government figures, and now $1 billion. What's a couple of $1 billion between friends, right? We need the science ship. It's very sciencey science. Very sciencey science. It's probably going to find all sorts of genders, right? Did you know whales had 20 genders? They feel very sealy. Can you identify as a seal? Mom! There's so many jokes. Okay, moving on. Line 5. Line 5 is a problem. Line 5 is an issue, and the governor of Michigan is playing political games, and they're going to use this to excuse... They're going to use this to force Enbridge to shut it down, or they're going to try. I hope they don't. I hope I'm wrong. Wow, Governor Gretchen Whitmer declares state of emergency in Michigan due to low propane supplies. What happens if Gretchen succeeds in shutting down Line 5, which supplies 50% of Michigan's propane? A permanent state of emergency? So if there's a permanent state of emergency, and again, they need the propane, right? So what are we going to do? I don't know. There's no backup. Forget it. Let's not solve this problem until it's a complete... Let's not solve this problem until we're actually rationing gas. And then let's blame white supremacists. Because that's what we do in Canada. We can't possibly enforce the law when there are people lighting fires on railroad tracks. But if there are people in downtown Toronto bothering John Tory, you get them arrested as soon as possible. Here's another fun one. The Bloc vows to defeat the budget if it helps oil and gas sectors. We don't need no stinking propane, says Quebec. They're not gonna help the budget, and that's federal, right? Legault is the premier. But anyway, regardless, they're not gonna vote for the budget if it helps oil and gas, right? No, you got to throw Alberta under the bus. Green economy only, right? Here's Friends of Science. This is talking about a leading economist. We need to act boldly now if we're to avoid economy-wide lockdowns to halt climate change. Lockdowns to halt climate change. Now, this article is completely insane. It says, under a climate lockdown, governments would limit private vehicle use, ban consumption of red meat, and impose extreme energy-saving measures, while fossil fuel companies would have to stop drilling. To avoid such a scenario, we must overhaul our economic securities and do capitalism differently. You know what? Whenever people claim that they know how to fix the whole system, we just have to listen to them. I always think of Darth Vader in the second movie, right? Where he's like, "Yeah, I get how it could be." In the second prequel trilogy, where he's all like, "Oh yeah, we could do that." And I think I don't want that guy making all the rules. Like, that's the last guy I want making all the rules. Darth Vader, and Anakin was just terrible. But anyway, anybody who thinks that they can, with the wave of their massive brain and intellect, can reimagine capitalism and everybody will just be happier and better off for it, no thanks. No thanks. That's not how society works. That's not how society works. Anyway, back to this. The climate crisis, says the article, is also a public health crisis. Global warming will cause drinking water to degrade. How? And enable pollution-linked respiratory diseases to thrive. Again, how? According to some projections, 3.5 billion people globally will live in unbearable heat by 2070. Oh, 2070. I thought 2030 was the end of the world. And then 2030 would be like the dregs would barely be alive. Now we're talking 2070? We got tons of time. Anyway, back to this. Addressing the triple crisis requires reorienting corporate governance, finance, policy, and energy systems towards a green economic transformation. To achieve this, these three obstacles must be removed. Business that is shareholder-driven instead of stakeholder-driven. Finance that is used in inadequate and inappropriate ways. And government that is based on outdated economic thinking and faulty assumptions. Well, could you get some more bedrock to base all of this on? Your complete reimagining is, we can't use money in inadequate and inappropriate ways, defined by me. Ha! What a joke. So yeah, I didn't read much more of that after reading that, because you can't take that seriously. That's just insane. Completely crazy. Anyway, Ezra Levent says, when you see Trudeau cabinet minister promoting a stock, you can bet there's already been some serious insider trading. It's a scam, and O'Regan should be investigated by Securities Commission. O'Regan's pushing electric snowmobiles, and everybody was like, cold kills batteries. I wouldn't want to sit my snowmobile and leave it for a day and then, hope that it's still charged when I'm ready to go home without an extra charge. And no, snowmobiles, electric snowmobiles. Yeah, that's not going to be a big seller. You want it liquid fuel in a can that you can carry has enough power to power heavy equipment for a longer period than a battery. And where do you charge it out in the wilderness? I'll just plug it into this tree here. It'll get there eventually. Sure. Morons. Anyway, mass vaccination sites prepared to open. There's confusion about who exactly is the next to get the COVID-19 vaccine. Guelph, the public health in Guelph tweeted out, "Oh, the vaccine's coming. We're going to have, clinics open on Monday, blah, 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 blah." And everybody, all the responses were like, "Can you be more clear about like who can get this vaccine? Like who should come to the clinics? Why aren't we doing long-term care homes first?" All sorts. And I think that they're all done. But there's not a lot of good communication coming out from this. And I think even to right now, and I think the clinics are open, there's still not good communication on this. So very, very interesting. Here is Cheryl Gallant, and she's in hot water because she's been deemed a conspiracy theorist, according to the Liberals. I'm not going to get into it too much, but I think that it's a very interesting situation when we've got the Liberals saying, well, Liberals accuse Conservative MP Cheryl Gallant of promoting deranged conspiracy theories. Federal Liberals are accusing a Conservative MP of promoting deranged conspiracy theories akin to those promulgated by supporters of former U.S. President Donald Trump. She's exactly like Trump. Look at that blonde hair. Can you see that? She's a white supremacist. She's a male white supremacist. She's not male. She's a pro-male white supremacist. Just like Trump. Everybody's just like Trump. Get him. Just like Trump, right? Anyway, in the video, Gallant says, liberals have become radicals who want all illicit drugs to be illegal and to normalize sexual activity with children. Liberal MP Jennifer O'Connell, who posted the video on Twitter, says Gallant is spreading disgusting and dangerous lies and asserting that her fear-mongering is a threat to our democracy. I'm surprised there wasn't a Trump-like dig there too. So yeah, they're going after anybody who they disagree with, and you can't point out the fact that they're trying to make all drugs legal and they like to legitimize sex with children in different ways. And pointing just to the CBC's normalization of drag kids and Desmond the Amazing on Netflix and the Cuties on Netflix. Like these things are things that exist. This is not like conspiracy theory. This is what's being pushed in the mainstream media, and the people in charge who could stop it aren't stopping it, and they're saying that you're actually pretty racist, right? Don't mention that. That's pretty racist. You white supremacist terrorist. Because that's all they can really come up with. Trump-like white supremacist racist. That's all they've got because they can't defend their positions, right? Here's another one calling out Cheryl Gallant, where she says, indeed, why bother covering up details if the government has nothing to hide? When Canadians find out Trudeau was complicit in unleashing the virus on the world, sane people will want him gone. And that's a conspiracy theory, according to Mark Garrettson. But here's the interesting part. They're using memes, right? Like he says, live shot from Aaron O'Toole's Conservative Party headquarters. I'm used to this meme. I've seen that meme quite a lot. I think it's quite funny. And here's an MP from the Liberal side. He says, so my question is if PHAC, the Canada's health agency, models have been largely correct and the health experts are predicting this type of exponential case growth, if premiers choose to move forward with lifting public health measures despite the evidence, are they culpable for the resulting deaths? Criminal negligence, and he cites the code. And he says, I'm not saying anyone is criminally negligent. I was simply quoting the definition. I think we need to be concerned about opening too fast and the possibility of an exponential growth in cases is a serious risk. We need to follow the advice of our public health professionals. And there's another one. He says, I'll also say our government has been putting the health and safety of Canadians first every step of the way and is continually guided by public health advice. We believe in science and evidence. I'm truly afraid for what will happen if we open too fast. Now, having MPs cite the criminal code is a large faux pas, and there were a lot of people who were very, very upset, specifically that he's citing this criminal code. And I wish that I could explain it in more detail, but I have not done the reading necessary to describe it in more detail. Here's a post-millennial. He says, Liberal MP suggests criminal charges for provincial officers who lift lockdown measures. And who's calling who crazy? Really? And then the Liberals, here's the Trudeau to announce process selecting Governor General in the coming days. Last time I guess there wasn't a process. I guess they were like, she's an astronaut, she's in. No, don't bother even calling up her previous employers. Who needs to? She's in. That's it. That's all we need to know. And, this time they might do more than that. Who knows? Last few stories for the day. General Vance, he's got a Me Too moment happening, right? This is the West Block reporting. Kelly Brennan is a soldier, is a woman, a warrior with lots of scars, a woman at the heart of the allegations against General Jonathan Vance is sharing her story publicly for the first time. This seems like another distraction. Another way to avoid talking about the impending Line 5 disaster, another way to avoid talking about the impending economic disaster, another way to avoid talking about the lack of accountability, the loss of civil liberties. And loss of civil liberties is by far number one. Number one, where's the news on that? They're silent. They're not even interviewing constitutional people saying, can they do this? It's been a year. This is an insane way to think that we're fighting a virus. How in the world is this a realistic way to defeat an illness by locking everyone in their homes and shutting off our economy? Nobody's talking about that, but they'll talk about this. Sorry that I don't care, but it's not that I don't care. I think that it's a distraction. I think that just like the Stormy Daniels stuff, right? Like Stormy was making a good living going on talk shows talking about how terrible Trump was, right? And it was provided fodder and narrative, right? Same. And I don't know if Vance is guilty or innocent. I don't know if this woman's a victim or anything to that effect. I'm sure there's some truth in the best lies, right? So not that I don't believe it. It's just that I don't care. There's so many other important stories. Why are you could highlight so many other things, so many more important things. And if this is really the level of national security and requires this spotlight, did it impact Vance and his job? How did it impact Vance and his job? Right? What security breaches happened? Because I've heard of the Winnipeg lab sending virus to the Wuhan lab. Right? I heard about that in 2015 or 2018 and saw the RCMP officers escorting them out. Why are we talking about that? Because you want to talk about a Me Too moment? No, sorry, not buying it. This is a disaster as well. This is a Washington Post article talking about Canada is plunging towards a human rights disaster for disabled people. Essentially, the guy at the center of the article was abused by the care home staff, or the care staff, the people who were supposed to come into your home and care for you. He was banged up against walls and given bad food, et cetera, and he went to the hospital. And in order to get discharged, he doesn't have the resources to get discharged. He was hoping for the hospital team to help him with that, taking into account that the care service that he was using was abusing him. And instead, they offered him medically assisted death. Like, you're not going to get better, buddy. We'll just end your misery now. It's cheaper for us, and get it done. And I've heard stories of this happening. Like, I've heard stories of people being worked on and convinced that it's in their best interest, and the collectivism. It's in the best interest of the group of us, right? Very interesting stuff. So I think this is a self-made disaster. I think that we're forgetting what makes us human, right? We're not dogs. We're not animals, and we shouldn't be trying to convince people who want to live to die, right? And if you want to die, if that's part and parcel of something that's happening to you, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to choose that necessarily, but I am saying that we shouldn't be prioritizing people's death over their continued potentially healthy life, right? Life has so much potential. Right? And the absence of life, that's the absence of potential. Holly Doan says 52%, well, this is a star opinion, 52% think news outlets are more concerned with supporting an ideology than informing the public, and 52% think the media is not doing well at being objective and nonpartisan. One possible remedy, don't take the government subsidies. Okay, so, and this is a Blacklock's, she's advertising her news, and she's great. She's uncovered some things and been ahead of the curve from a lot of newspapers, so well done. But I think that it's interesting that there's a lot of people, and a majority of people, 52 is a majority, who think that the news is fake news. And like I said, right, like with this Vance story, the Vance story serves a purpose, right? Drives a narrative, continues the story a little bit, and provides a great distraction from the real news that's going on, right? So very interesting stuff happening in our world, and nobody really wants to tell us about it, right? A few people do, but nobody in the mainstream media wants to tell the masses about it, and the masses are quite content to eat up what the mainstream media is serving to them currently, right? Sex scandals and all of that. Very interesting. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.